So I will start, Amy, first with a bit of your background. Where do you live? Where are you from? And how long how long have you been in this particular line of work of mediation, facilitation, and so on?
I have been a proud resident of Durham for over 25 years, but I have lived in a co-housing community now in downtown Durham for 5.5 years. So I am one of the founding members of Durham Central Park Cohousing community. And that has been full of insights for me that I sometimes bring to your community, to Bull City Commons. I have been facilitating professionally and in a community contexts for the better part of the last couple of decades for nonprofits mostly. And I guess I consider Bull City Commons also to be a nonprofit. And that's just where the work has taken me. My interests have always been in the nonprofit sector. My career has been there as well. And I enjoy facilitation. Well, we'll get to the whys and the hows of it, but that's a little bit of background about me. I'm comfortable in a facilitation role and in that space.
What are some of the ground rules that you typically have to follow when facilitating a meeting?
I always choose to work with groups that have ground rules. I think that's an important piece of understanding a group's values. And if they don't have them at the outset, then that would be the first step that I would take, is to establish what those might be. I think it's important to make sure that people have the opportunity to speak and that they only speak for themselves. I think it's important that that everyone recognizes that a facilitator is there for everyone's benefit, and to try to hold the container and ensure that everyone is able to contribute as best they can. So there are other things, small and large, about maybe not paying attention to your phone and taking care of your, bio breaks, as we call them, if you need to go to the bathroom or you need to eat something or you need to stand up. That's up to the individual. But when I think about BCC and being 30 some people versus a small group of 5, there aren't a lot of differences in those ground rules. What tends to happen as a facilitator is you just have more to pay attention to when the group is larger. I want to see if someone is checking out a little bit more, meaning they're not in it, and then I'm gonna think about, why is that happening? Why have we maybe lost their attention? Or if somebody seems a little more coming forward, maybe not agitated, but a little keen about responding. Those are, some visual cues that you attend to as you're making sure that a meeting is proceeding as you expect it to or want it to.
How does
Yes.
facilitating a meeting run by sociocratic ground rules differ from facilitating other meetings that are not sociocratic?
So in Durham Central Park Cohousing community, we work on consensus-based decision-making, and that is a fine model. And in fact, I was on a board last year, and as president of that board, I asked that we adopt consensus-based decision-making, and we actually went towards sociocracy in particular. And the difference that I see and the beauty of sociocracy is its emphasis on equal voice, which consensus-based decision-making means you get to a great decision. In my mind's eye, sociocracy means you get to a great decision and everyone has an opportunity to be heard along the way. So that's a big difference to me, because I can tell you about meetings that I've been in, as even though I facilitate and I'm comfortable in that kind of milieu, I tend to be quiet in my own community. I do a lot of listening more than I do talking. And if I'm not called upon, I just might not engage. And that's not to say I'm not paying attention, but it's to say, if I feel like my points or what I have to contribute have mostly been contributed by someone else, then I'm going to defer to what's already been said and not add to the conversation and the discussion. Whereas, so it's a little more pointed with sociocracy then, because you're going to go around and do a whole round with everyone, at least the way BCC operates within, you know, a sociocratic method. And so that to me has just a lot more power to it, for every member to expect that they're going to be called on. And you see it works well in your community where people are called on and they say, great points have been made, I don't have anything to add, or my opinions have already been reflected by others. And so the conversation moves along. And so that's one of the great strengths of sociocracy in my mind's eye, and an improvement on consensus-based decision-making.
What's the prep and the groundwork needed to get ready for a meeting so that the meeting itself can go, if not trouble-free, can go in a very steady forward fashion?
Some of that prep is making sure that the agenda is clear, that it reflects the amount of time that I think various topics will need. But I think you all are the ones bearing the burden of an excellent meeting, not only in your comportment within a meeting, but also in, like you said, Mike, all of the preparation that goes into that meeting. It's not as though you all show up for a meeting and you're just going to now have a conversation. No, you show up to meetings because you've had your development oversight circle busy working on things, and you've had governance busy working on some other things, and marketing and membership doing their tasks. And so it is this coming together of your collaboration. But pulling back from that and more to your question, the preparation then for an agenda is making sure that it's timely, that these are the issues that really do need attention, that they're going to receive the amount of time that they need, that they're going to go through the process appropriately. So is it just an issue that only needs a clarifying round of questions? Or is it an issue that needs that and also a reaction round? Or are you as a community at a point in time where you're ready to go through a consent process? So that's part of what I think about when I look at any of the agenda that come before me in preparation for a meeting. I also think you have all the materials that people prepare as you get ready for a meeting. And so that's some of the 90% that's under the water in terms of the iceberg analogy. But now you add on top of that personal dynamics. What's going on for people, both in their lives and in their membership in the community? Are they struggling with something both personally or community-wise? Whether it's a policy or it's because someone in their family is sick. Like, all of that also comes into play. And I try to read how people are doing in those moments. But as Candace is the lead of your steering circle, she and I also will have conversations, not about those personal dynamics, but about anything that is interpersonal among you that she's aware of. So if she says, well, I've heard enough to believe that we have opposing opinions on this issue, and so we're just going to have to see how the rounds play out and whether we're going to reach consensus. So that helps me just think through what I'm going to do as a facilitator. If there is an objection, how we're going to explore that. And I've seen it work so well in your community where we have a proposal and then the proposal gets tweaked and it becomes more palatable to everyone. And that's part of what consensus-based decision-making will do for you, but then sociocracy layering onto that and making sure everyone is heard. So that's all the prep. And so there's some small amount of prep on my part as your facilitator. There's much more work that's going on by all of you as you're contributing to, building beloved community. That's the larger part under the ocean.
Amy, could you now talk a little bit about what the actual process of a sociocratic meeting is?
So sociocracy it's beautiful in that you are consenting to any decision that the group makes as a whole. So that means that you consent to the agenda before it is upon you. So ideally then no one is surprised by that agenda and the items therein. And I suppose if there were an objection at that point, we would stop the meeting and have to explore why there would be an objection, right? And then you're going to work through a set of issues, and the sociocracy goes through 3 rounds if you're going to take an issue from its very starting point through to consent. The first round being one of clarifying questions. So what are the issues that people are unsure about and need to understand more in order to move them along the spectrum to consent? So that's your clarifying round. From your clarifying round, you move into reaction round. And that is where you and each member of the community is asked to express what they think of this idea. How well baked is it? Are there issues that are small, maybe about a certain amount of money and a comfort level with that amount of money maybe being less or maybe being more? I'm thinking of your Zoom meeting this last month where you were looking at authorizing the development oversight circle and how much money they could spend on a change order. And what you arrived at was a consent decision after you revisited the proposal and lowered the amount of the change order threshold. So that's a reaction round, which then gets you to a consent round. And sometimes consent rounds go swimmingly and everyone's on board and you just go around the whole circle and everyone in the community, is that what I mean by the whole circle, which it's not really a circle these days on Zoom. You go around like on Hollywood Squares now. And so you're looking to make sure everyone is consenting. So is everyone in agreement? And I find that to be a powerful process and an important one. And I don't take it lightly when you all are consenting. And for that reason, I've been insistent that all of the consenting is verbal and that I see each and every one of you and you look at me so that it's not a passive action. So those are the 3 rounds that you go through for sociocracy: clarifying questions, a reaction round, and then a consent round. And I think you all getting to hear each other throughout those rounds is a really important aspect of how you build community and how you get to know each other better. How you think about things, what your approach is, because some people may come at an issue from a very emotional place and others may be very rational about it, but all of that comes out in this process. And so making sure everyone understands the issues is part of clarifying, but then hearing, I think this is great versus I'm not such a fan and here's why. Like those are all important pieces of you getting to consent.
Our plenary meetings are quite long, about 3 hours. What is the purpose of the opening and closing rounds? They take up a bit of time. Why do we have them?
I think that if you don't have the ability to check in with each other and really understand where you are as you come into that meeting, it's a slight on what you're trying to do as a group, which is to be there together. And so if you don't allow for that, then people can be even more distracted by whatever they have going on. I know in my life and in my career, I always have a check-in at the beginning of a meeting because it gives people the opportunity to express what they have going on. And maybe then that's partially helps them center themselves and focus, but maybe also some of the time it gives them a get out of jail free card and allows them to say, you know what, I'm going to try my dogged best here. But the fact that my cat is ill right now is really what's on my mind. So I'm here, at least in body, but in mind and spirit, I'm sometimes maybe going to be elsewhere. And so you have a little more patience for where that person is coming from. So that's the important piece of the opening round. But then the closing round is, how do you get to be better at what you just did? What happened in that time together? 3 hours is a long time, Lise, but I find the time, you need that time both to grow the community and you need that time to transact the business of the community. When you think about the fact that you all are building a building together and you're now getting really close to a time when you're going to break ground and start construction, there's a lot that had to happen to get you up to this point, but there's a lot more to come And the more you know each other and the more you assess your own process, which is what you do in a closing round, the better you are to meet the next challenges and continue to do the work that's coming, at your next meeting, and from one meeting to the next, the in between. You're only coming together once a month, and yet you are building a building. Think about that. That's huge, actually. So 3 hours of all of you together once a month does not seem to me like it's a huge burden. In fact, I think it's the right amount of time, and the reason it's the right amount of time is because you have so much other work that happens outside of your meeting times.
Do you feel comfortable talking about circles and the importance of developing aims and domain?
I'm happy to. I think that because your governance structure being what it is, it's really important to understand where decision-making lies. And so as a community, you approve of what it is that a circle is supposed to do, right? You all have input into aims and domains, but if you have, and then once that's done, that's basically the decision, that's the power that you've given to that circle. You as a community have said, yes, this is what we're now asking you to do. This is all that is in your wheelhouse. Go forth, prosper, do the good work. So that's how you both attend to that work, is you give them, a container in which they are supposed to work. So they know what the limits are of their authority. And if they need to go beyond that authority, then they come back to the community. But otherwise, they're working within that, what has been set forth by them, but approved by your community. So that's how this kind of devolved governance works, where not everyone is in on every last decision that a circle is making. And that's why it works and how it works. And so it is important to have clarity around those things. It's important for all of you to understand all the policies and all of the processes, but aims and domains are a key part of recognizing what the power is for a given group, what the confines of that authority and power happen to be.
Ted Rao has said, objections are great because that's where you actually find out what matters to individuals, and you gives the community a chance to address them.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if you could talk about the power of objection, and do we want to avoid objections in a meeting, since this is all about consent?
I agree with them that objection there's beauty to it, even though it means your process may slow because you have to unpack the objection. And I think I see so much cohesion and collaboration among you. And I believe you have trust, and you've built some trust, and that's without living together yet, such that I think if any one of you objected to a proposal, that would give you all pause. And whether it's just a tweak to the language or it's much bigger, I promise you that unpacking that will get you to a better place, because objections should be based in the values of your community. So someone doesn't get to object to something because they don't like the color of the paper that it's printed on. You don't get to object for really immaterial reasons. So when you have someone choosing to object because it has power and it's a weighty thing to do in a community, then it's an important thing as well, and that they have a differing view. And now it's time to step back and understand where that view is coming from, what values it's grounded in, and then how that shapes what they see as an alternative proposal. And is that alternative proposal more palatable to the community? And if not, then where is the compromise, and where do you find the best solution to move forward? And all that I've known in my years, and objections are rare, but when you have objections, the outcome tends to be an improved outcome. that you get to a different place than you may have originally thought you were going, but that place is better, is equally as good as where you were headed, if not better. And so that's the beauty of an objection. And in no way would I try and squash an objection. My worry for you all is only that you're on a timeline now with building the building where that you will all call home, and building your community. And so some decisions require some timeliness. And if there were objections to those, then there has to be some concession to when you're going to come back together, maybe sooner than you might have planned or imagined, in order to unpack that objection and address the situation as it stands.
You've implied that some objections are valid and some aren't. As a facilitator, how do you determine that, and how do you deal with it?
You have to be grounded in what the community's values are, and the onus is actually more on the person who's objecting. So they have to talk more about why they're objecting, and then there's this question to your community about whether that's valid. And so I am not the arbiter of whether an objection is valid. That always goes back to the community and to the group that's being facilitated, for them to tell me that they feel that what this person has said is reasonable and is grounded in the values of your community. And I don't know what the particulars are for BCC, to be honest, but in my community, you have to have at least one other person who agrees with you and agrees that your objection is reasonable and is based in community values. So at that point, where someone else is willing to say, yes, I think the reasons that Lise is objecting to and the values that she has put forward as the reasons for objecting, I agree with that is a reasonable case to be made. And then you move from there. You can't just have, and I don't even imagine it would happen in your community where somebody would object and not be grounded in something that uses your community values and is a sensible thing to think or to say. Because I think you haven't had any objections because people recognize the power of them, that calls a halt to everything. Like, that play is now dead. Play on the field, dead. Let's move on and figure out how we're going to move forward now, because what we were thinking we were going to do has to change. And now you're going to figure out how to move forward.
The Sociocracy book defines, the objection has to be, this will be detrimental to the community. That's the level where the objection comes in. It can't be something personal. Like, I don't like the color of this. It's, this is going to hurt the community. That's the level at which the objection has to come in and has to be addressed. And I think the onus, as you say, is also on that person to help come up with a solution. They can't just lob in a grenade and say, I object, and then walk off. They have to take on some of the responsibility for addressing the issue.
There are decisions that affect your individual units, which are individual level decisions, right? So your cabinetry. But you've all gone into this with the idea of trying to be as cost effective as you can. And so born out of that, which is a shared commitment, right? Born out of that shared commitment of being cost effective in building your building, that translates to you having limited options for things, limited flooring, limited options for those kitchen cabinets, whatever it may be. And now what you have to do, because you cannot make decisions as a group of 30 some odd people all the time, you have to devolve some of that decision-making authority. And that's where you have groups, you have circles of people who meet to make these decisions, and you are entrusting to them those decisions. And it is sometimes a hard-fought thing for people to recognize that they've let go of some power and ceded it to another group. But in the end, that's the only way to make progress when there are a multitude of decisions that have to be made day in and day out. You can't have 30 some odd people making those decisions day in and day out. It's an overwhelming array of decisions, even for some of the smaller circles. Like the development oversight circle, the decisions that are on them, they're huge. finance, legal, I would think in certain periods of time, there are a lot of decisions on them. Marketing, membership, as you have these last 2 units to sell, there's a lot of responsibility that lies with them in trying to get those last 2 units sold. And so what I see in every community is that you have to trust the group that's been given that power. And if you don't trust them, or it is so near and dear to you that you want to have a voice in that decision, then join that circle. That's where your power lies. You can decide to contribute by joining, or you can have input in a meeting, like your plenary. Outside of those 2 things, you've got to let some stuff fly.
Is there anything we've not asked or talked about that you would like to bring up or discuss?
One of the things that I love about facilitating for both City Commons is I get to watch you all build beloved community together. And I can't tell you how fiercely passionate I am about what you're trying to do, not only as a member of another co-housing community, but as an advocate for such a thing. And I love seeing you all come together, and just the intensity that it takes and the visioning to deliver on this promise of you all being together in a year plus from now. I remember in passing having a conversation with one of your community members, and she said to me, are you really sure that this is going to work for us, that we're going to end up living together and we're going to achieve this vision? And I said, this was many, many months ago now. And I said, yeah, I'm quite sure. I feel it in my bones that this is going to happen, and you all are going to be living together and just so full of joy when you get to that point. And so that's something that, as much as I have my experience living in co-housing, I very rarely am asked to contribute that to facilitating for your community. And I understand why. I understand you are your own brand of co-housing, right? And so you should be developing that for yourselves. And every once in a while, a small question comes up about maybe how we did something in my community, and I'm happy to share. But going into this, that was what I was so excited about when Doris called me and said, we'd like for you to, give us a trial, come facilitate for us in May of last year. And I was just like, yeah, let's give it a go. And that's what I've been most excited about, is just being able to help you work through your plenary meetings and get to the other side of, having had a productive meeting. So I heart BCC.